Nara had always loved riding alone. The open land made her feel free, and the sound of her horse's hooves gave her a kind of peace she could never find inside the crowded Apache camp. That day, the sky was clear, the wind was gentle, and she wanted nothing more than a few hours of quiet. The animal was strong, sure-footed, and loyal. She trusted it more than most people. But the land had changed after last night's rain. The ground looked dry on the surface, yet underneath it was soft and uneven. Nara didn't notice the small hole hidden under the tall grass. Her horse stepped into it, and everything happened so fast that she didn't even have time to scream. The animal stumbled, then jerked sideways, throwing her completely off its back. She hit the ground hard, the impact shocking the breath out of her. For a moment she couldn't move. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, and a sharp pain exploded through her leg. She tried to sit up and gasped. Her leg throbbed so badly she felt sick. When she tried to stand, her right leg buckled under her and she fell again, the pain flashing like fire. She clenched her teeth, trying not to cry out. Crying wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't bring anyone. Her horse, frightened by the fall, ran off across the field. She watched it disappear into the distance, leaving her alone in the quiet valley. The sun was high, but she felt cold. She tried calling out, but no one answered. The land here was wide and empty, and she had ridden far too far for anyone from her tribe to hear her. Hours passed slowly. The pain in her leg grew worse, spreading upward like a heavy weight dragging her down. She dragged herself toward a dry creek bed, hoping to find some shade, but every movement felt like a knife twisting inside her leg. The wind carried the sounds of birds and insects, but no footsteps, no voices, nothing human. She began to fear what would happen when night came. Wolves roamed these fields. The cold could be deadly, and she had no fire, no horse, and no way to stand. She pressed her palm to her leg, trying to keep it still, but the slightest touch made her wince. She breathed slowly, trying to stay calm. She told herself she would survive. She had survived storms, sickness, and long winters. She could survive this too. But as the shadows grew longer and the light began to fade, she felt worry creeping into her chest. Then she heard something, a distant wooden creak. At first she thought it was the wind, but the sound came again, slow and steady, like wheels rolling over dry dirt. She lifted her head, squinting against the sunlight. Far across the field, a figure approached. It was a wagon, pulled by an old horse, and a man walked beside it with steady steps. For a moment she wasn't sure if she should call out. She didn't know who he was, or if he would help her. But the pain was becoming harder to bear, and she had no choice. She raised her hand weakly and tried calling out, but her voice came out faint. Still, the man noticed the small movement. He stopped, shaded his eyes with his hand, and then began walking quickly toward her. As he came closer, she could see him clearly. He was a farmer, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s, with sunburned skin and a tired but kind expression. His clothes were old but neat, and he moved with the quiet strength of someone who worked hard every day. His eyes widened when he saw her injury. He knelt beside her without hesitation. "You're hurt," he said softly, his voice warm and steady. "Don't try to stand." Nara studied his face carefully. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't look angry or afraid. His eyes were full of concern, not suspicion. Still, she stayed tense. She had met good men and bad men. Trust was not something she gave easily. The man noticed her uncertainty and spoke gently. "My name is Samuel," he said. "I live a few miles from here. Can you tell me what happened?" She took a slow breath and told him about the fall. He listened quietly, nodding. When she winced again, he didn't ask more questions. He simply reached into his bag and pulled out a long, soft cloth, his scarf. He wrapped it around her leg carefully, his hands steady and respectful. He never touched anywhere he didn't need to, keeping his focus only on the injury. The tightness of the cloth helped a little. The throbbing pain softened. She let out a shaky breath, surprised at the relief. Samuel looked at her again. "You can't stay out here," he said gently. "It'll be dark soon. You need a warm place and someone to watch over that leg." She wanted to argue, to tell him she could manage, but she knew it wasn't true. She could barely move. He continued softly. "The town doctor is far. My house is closer. I can take you there. I promise you will be safe." His voice was honest. His eyes held no hidden meaning. She didn't feel fear from him, only concern. She nodded once. Slowly, Samuel lifted her carefully, making sure not to twist her injured leg. Even though he wasn't a large man, he carried her with surprising strength. She felt embarrassed at first, but his calm manner eased her discomfort. He placed her gently in the back of his wagon, arranging some blankets so she could rest more comfortably. The wagon began moving, the old horse pulling steadily. Nara lay back, watching the sky as they moved across the fields. The pain still burned inside her, but she no longer felt alone. She listened to the soft creaking of the wheels, the quiet clop of the horse's hooves, and the steady breath of the man beside her. Everything felt strangely peaceful. Samuel walked beside the wagon most of the way, checking on her often. He would ask, "Are you holding up?" Or, "Does the bandage feel too tight?" His questions were simple, but they meant more than she expected. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentle patience. As the sun sank lower, they reached his small farmhouse. It stood alone on a wide stretch of land. The house was simple wooden walls, a small porch, a dim lantern hanging by the door, but it looked safe, warm, and welcoming. He carried her inside, careful not to bump her leg, and laid her on the only bed in the house. The room was quiet, filled with the smell of wood and herbs. Samuel went to light a lamp, then hesitated. "This is my bed," he said. "You need it more than I do." She looked around and realized he truly lived alone. The silence inside the house spoke of long years without company. He placed a folded blanket on the floor near the doorway. "I'll sleep here," he told her. "If you need anything, just say my name." Nara didn't know why, but his words warmed her more than the fire he lit in the small stove. He made her a bowl of warm soup, helped her sit up carefully, and waited while she ate. After she finished, he checked her leg once more, replacing the scarf with clean cloth and herbs to reduce the swelling. He moved with a gentleness she was not used to, a kindness that felt almost rare. She lay back against the pillow, watching him as he cleaned up quietly. He worked as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. When the house finally grew quiet, and the night wrapped around them, Nara felt something she didn't expect to feel. After such a painful day, she felt safe. She closed her eyes, the dull ache in her legs slowly fading as her body relaxed. Samuel sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, leaning against the wall. He stayed awake for a long time, making sure she was resting well. He didn't know her story, her people, or where she came from. But that didn't matter. She was injured, alone, and without help, and that was enough reason for him to care. In the deep stillness of the night, she whispered a quiet, "Thank you," not sure if he heard it. But Samuel smiled slightly in the darkness. Their lives had crossed by accident, but this one accident had already begun to change both of them. The next morning, Nara woke to the smell of warm bread and something sweet cooking on the stove. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The wooden ceiling, the soft blanket, the quiet room, everything felt unfamiliar. Then her eyes moved, and she saw Samuel sitting by the stove, stirring a small pot. His back was straight, his movements slow and careful, as if he didn't want to make any noise that might disturb her. He turned when he heard her shift. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, though the pain in her leg was still sharp when she moved. Samuel walked over, carrying a small wooden tray. On it sat a bowl of warm porridge, a slice of bread, and a cup of water. He placed it on a chair beside the bed and helped her sit up by lifting her gently from behind. He never rushed, never touched anywhere he didn't need to, and always asked, "Is this okay?" before moving her leg. Nara ate slowly, watching him move around the room. His house was small, simple, and old, but everything was neat. There were no decorations, no family pictures, no sign that anyone else lived there. Only a few handmade shelves, some tools, and one old rocking chair by the window. It felt like a house that had waited a long time for another voice. After she finished eating, Samuel checked her leg. He unwrapped the cloth with gentle hands. "The swelling is still there," he said softly, "but it's a little better than last night." He prepared a fresh herbal paste, mixing dried leaves with warm water. The scent filled the room, calming and earthy. He placed the paste on her leg and wrapped clean cloth around it. His hands worked with the confidence of someone who had treated many animals and maybe a few injured travelers in the past. Nara watched him closely. She didn't know much about him, but something about his quiet patience made her feel comfortable. In her tribe, people often spoke loudly, shared stories, laughed together. Here, the silence felt different, not cold, just peaceful. When he finished tending to her injury, Samuel stood and stretched. "I have some chores to do outside," he said. "If you need anything, call for me. I'll hear you." She nodded. She listened as he stepped out of the house. The screen door creaked softly, then shut. The sudden quiet inside the room felt heavy at first. She wasn't used to being still, unable to walk or move freely. But as she lay back against the pillow, she realized the silence wasn't unpleasant. It was calm, almost comforting. Through the small window, she watched Samuel work. He fed the chickens, checked the fences, and filled buckets of water from the small well. He moved with steady purpose, like someone used to working alone every day, without complaint and without expecting anything in return. Hours passed, and Nara found herself waiting for the sound of the door opening again. When it finally creaked open, Samuel stepped inside carrying a basket of vegetables and a small bunch of herbs. His boots were dusty, his shirt damp with sweat from the sun. Yet the moment he saw her awake, he gave a small smile. "You're still doing all right?" he asked. She nodded, and he set the basket down. He washed his hands, then prepared a simple lunch of vegetables and bread. She tried to help by slicing some herbs with a small knife. But as soon as he noticed her struggling to sit upright, he gently took the knife from her hand. "You're here to heal," he said kindly. "Let me do this." He served her first, then ate quietly on the rocking chair across the room. The soft creak of the chair and the warm afternoon light gave the room a peaceful feeling. Nara relaxed more than she expected. She wasn't used to being taken care of. In her tribe, everyone worked hard, and no one had time to rest unless absolutely necessary. But Samuel seemed to think rest was part of healing, and the way he watched over her made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. As the days went by, a quiet rhythm settled into the house. Samuel rose early, cooked breakfast, checked her leg, and then went outside to tend the farm. Nara spent her mornings resting, watching the sunlight move across the walls, or listening to the distant sounds of Samuel's work. When the pain wasn't too strong, she helped in small ways, washing a cup, cutting soft vegetables, or folding cloth for bandages. Samuel always thanked her, even for the smallest task. In the afternoons, after finishing his chores, Samuel would sit and talk with her. At first, their conversations were short. He wasn't a man who talked much, but Nara asked gentle questions, and slowly, he opened up. He told her about his parents, who had died years ago. He had inherited the small farm, and he worked it alone ever since. He never married, never had children. Life kept him busy, but there were days he felt the weight of silence too heavily. Nara listened quietly, feeling a soft ache in her chest. She could see the loneliness behind his calm eyes. She could hear it in the way his voice softened when he mentioned the long winters he had spent alone. When it was her turn to speak, she shared stories about her people, the celebrations, the dances, the hunting trips, the small children running through the camp. She told him about her horse, the one that had run off, and how she had raised it since it was young. Samuel listened to her with the same patience he gave every living thing on his farm. One afternoon, the wind grew strong, rattling the windows. Nara tried to stand, though Samuel had warned her not to. She wanted to look outside, frustrated by being stuck in bed. When she put weight on her injured leg, it buckled, and she nearly fell. Samuel rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. "Please," he said softly, helping her sit back down. "Don't push yourself. You'll only make it worse." His voice wasn't angry. It was full of concern. She lowered her head, embarrassed, but he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're used to being strong," he said. "But strength also means knowing when to rest." His words calmed her. She lay back again, watching him as he fixed the blanket around her. She realized she trusted him more every day. One evening, Samuel brought in a small wooden box and placed it on the table beside her bed. Inside were different herbs he had gathered from nearby fields. He explained what each one was for pain, swelling, fever, rest. He spoke with surprising knowledge, and she found herself learning from him. As she picked up one of the herbs, she noticed how closely he watched her face, as if trying to see whether she was comfortable or in pain. His attention was quiet, but constant. At night, he still slept near the door, wrapped in a blanket. He never once tried to move closer or make her uncomfortable. He respected her space completely. There were moments when she woke from a dream or from pain, and Samuel would already be sitting up, asking softly if she needed water or another pillow. Day by day, the swelling in her leg began to decrease. She could move it slightly without sharp pain. Samuel celebrated each small improvement with a warm smile. "You're healing," he said, often. "Just a little more time." But what changed even more than her injury was the atmosphere in the house. The once silent farmhouse was now filled with soft voices, gentle laughter, and the calm companionship of two people who had begun to understand each other. Nara noticed the change in Samuel too. He didn't walk with the heavy stillness he had when she first arrived. His steps were lighter, his expressions softer. Sometimes, while preparing food or fixing tools, he hummed quietly, something she had never heard him do before. One afternoon, as Samuel repaired a broken fence outside, Nara sat by the window, her leg resting comfortably. She watched him work, noticing how the sun lit his face, how determined and steady he looked. Something warm settled in her heart, something she couldn't fully name yet. Inside that small wooden house, something new was growing, slowly, gently, and without either of them speaking it aloud. A bond formed not from loud declarations, but from kindness, quiet moments, shared meals, and the simple presence of another human being after years of loneliness. As evening settled, and Samuel came inside, his hands dusty and his shirt damp from work, he looked at her with a softness she had started to recognize. And when she smiled at him, it felt like she was smiling at someone she had known for far longer than a few days. Their days of healing were not just about her leg anymore. They were about two hearts learning how to trust, how to share space, and how to find warmth in places neither expected. And as night fell, with the soft glow of the stove warming the room, both of them felt that life inside the quiet farmhouse had changed forever. The days passed peacefully, and Nara settled into a calm routine inside the quiet farmhouse. Her leg was healing slowly, and although she could not walk yet, the pain had reduced enough that she could sit up without struggling. She spent more time near the window, watching the land stretch out in every direction. Golden fields, gentle hills, and long fences that marked Samuel's hard work. Each time she looked outside and saw him tending the animals or repairing tools, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. Samuel continued to treat her with the same gentle care he had shown from the beginning. He woke early to make breakfast, always setting aside the softest bread or the warmest piece of potato for her plate. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but when he smiled, even slightly, it filled the small room with comfort. Nara didn't know how long she would stay in his home, but each sunrise made her feel more grateful for the accident that had brought her here. But outside the peaceful walls of the farmhouse, the world was changing. Unknown to Nara and Samuel, people in the nearby settlement had noticed the Apache woman riding through the area days earlier. Some settlers had seen her horse running alone afterward, without a rider. Whispers began to spread, some out of worry, others out of suspicion. These were tense times, and fear often made people think the worst. When they couldn't find any signs of her, a few men started asking questions. Stories grew quickly, and soon the settlers convinced themselves she might be scouting or watching the land for some unknown reason. One afternoon, when Samuel was outside repairing a fence, a neighbor named Henry rode up to him. Henry was taller, stronger, and the kind of man who liked to know everything happening in the area. He dismounted and walked toward Samuel with heavy boots. "Samuel," he called. "You seen anything strange the past few days?" Samuel wiped the sweat from his forehead and shook his head slowly. "Strange? No, can't say I have." Henry crossed his arms. "Some folks think an Apache woman was around here. Her tracks were seen near your land." Samuel felt a quiet jolt of worry shoot through his chest, but he kept his face calm. Tracks come and go, after a rain. Hard to say who left them. Henry narrowed his eyes, studying Samuel's expression. "If you see anything, you better speak up," he warned. "We don't want trouble." Samuel nodded, and Henry rode off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and unease. When Samuel stepped inside the house later, Nara noticed his tense shoulders immediately. She studied his face, trying to read what he wasn't saying. "Something happened?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "People are talking. They think you might be somewhere around here." "Oh." Nara's hand tightened on the blanket. "Are they coming?" she asked softly. Samuel pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "Not yet. But they're looking. If they find you here, they might misunderstand everything." She lowered her eyes. "You helped me. You gave me shelter. I didn't mean to bring trouble. I didn't mean to bring trouble." "You didn't bring trouble," Samuel said firmly. "People create trouble when they let fear decide for them." For the rest of the day, Samuel moved around the house with more caution, checking the windows often and listening for any distant voices. Nara felt guilt settle in her chest, like a heavy stone. She wished she could walk, or even ride away, so she wouldn't cause him any trouble. But her leg still wasn't strong enough. That same evening, while Samuel was outside gathering wood, Nara heard something horses, several of them, approaching fast. She pushed herself up, heart pounding. Within moments, she saw 3 settlers riding toward the farmhouse. The leader was Henry. Samuel dropped the wood and hurried toward them. Nara watched through a narrow opening in the window, her breath caught in her throat. Henry dismounted and walked up to Samuel. "We're checking all the properties," he said. "If someone's hiding her, we need to know." Samuel kept his voice steady. "I told you earlier." Henry stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know you like to keep to yourself, Samuel, but don't lie to us. People are worried." The 2 other men dismounted and looked toward the house. One of them began walking toward the door. Samuel quickly stepped in front of him. "Hold on," Samuel said. "There's no reason to go inside." The man smirked. "Then you won't mind if we take a look." Samuel's jaw tightened. "My house is my home," he said. "No one enters without my say." Henry raised a brow. "Now, why would you stop us if there's nothing inside?" The air grew thick. The sun was sinking, painting the land orange, but the tension made everything feel cold. Samuel knew he couldn't let them walk into the house, not with Nara inside, weak and frightened. He took a slow breath, grounding himself. "You want to check the barn?" Samuel said. "Go ahead. Check the shed, the field, anywhere else. But inside the house? That's where I draw the line." Henry studied him, trying to decide if he was hiding something or just stubborn. Samuel didn't flinch. Finally, Henry exhaled sharply. "Fine. But if we find out you lied." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The warning was clear. The three men searched the barn and shed, kicking through hay and peeking into corners. Nara lay in the bed with her heart beating rapidly, every muscle tense. She could hear Samuel's footsteps outside, following them, making sure they didn't wander too close. After nearly half an hour, the settlers mounted their horses again. Henry glared at Samuel before riding off. "If we find her," he said loudly, "we'll ask again how she survived this long." When the men disappeared into the distance, Samuel let out a breath he had been holding. He walked slowly back toward the house, his steps heavy with worry. Inside, Nara sat upright, her eyes filled with anxiety. "They'll come again," she whispered. Samuel nodded. "Probably. They think they're doing the right thing." "You should let me leave," she said quietly, "before they find me here." Samuel shook his head. "You can't even stand on your own yet, and I'm not turning you out while you're hurt." His voice softened but carried strong resolve. "I won't do that to anyone. Not even a stranger." His words touched her deeply. She looked at him for a long moment, seeing not just a lonely farmer, but a man with a strong sense of right and wrong. A man who protected without expecting praise. As the evening grew darker, Samuel double-checked the locks and brought a chair near the window where he could look out occasionally. Nara watched him silently. She felt guilt, gratitude, fear, and something else all mixing inside her heart. Later that night, after the land fell quiet again, Nara tried once more to stand. She thought if she could take even a few steps, she could leave before she brought more trouble. But the moment she put weight on her leg, pain shot through her body, and she collapsed back onto the bed. Samuel rushed to her instantly. "You can't do this," he said softly, lifting her gently. "You'll hurt yourself worse." Tears filled her eyes, not from the pain, but from helplessness. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," he replied firmly. "You're a person who needed help. That's all." She looked up at him, and for a moment, the fear in her heart settled. In that small farmhouse, guarded by a man she barely knew, she felt safer than she had in many places before. The next morning, Samuel checked the window again as he cooked breakfast. The land looked quiet, but both of them knew it wouldn't stay that way forever. Trouble had already found them once, and it would likely return. But as the sun rose, lighting the fields with golden warmth, Nara realized something important. She wasn't facing this danger alone. Samuel had stood between her and three men without hesitation. He had risked suspicion, anger, and trouble, all to protect someone he didn't owe anything to. In that silent moment, as Samuel placed her breakfast on the small table and gave her one of his gentle smiles, she understood how deeply she trusted him. And with that trust came the quiet courage that would change both their lives in the days to come. The morning after the settlers came searching felt different inside the farmhouse. The air was still and heavy, as if the land itself was worried about what might happen next. Samuel tried to act calm, moving around the kitchen and preparing breakfast the same way he did every day. But Nara could see something quiet and unsettled in his eyes. He checked the window more often than usual, lifting the curtain just slightly, looking out at the long dirt road as if expecting riders to appear at any moment. Nara ate slowly, her thoughts tangled with worry. She didn't want to bring danger to Samuel's peaceful home, not after all he had done for her. The memory of him standing firm against the 3 settlers protecting her without even thinking of the risk kept returning to her again and again. She had known many people in her life, but she had never met a man like him. A man who acted brave not to show strength, but simply because he believed in doing what was right. After breakfast, Samuel sat at the small table with a cup of warm tea. Nara watched him, trying to read his thoughts through the quiet lines of his face. He finally spoke, his voice low. "They'll come again," he said. "Not today, maybe, but they will." She nodded. She already knew this. The settlers weren't the type to forget their suspicions easily. Samuel looked at her leg. "You're healing well," he said. "Maybe another week, and you could walk with support." Nara looked down at her injured leg, wrapped carefully in clean cloth. She had already regained some movement, and the pain had eased more each day, but she still couldn't imagine walking freely, let alone riding. And leaving before she could move properly would be almost impossible. "Samuel," she said softly, "I don't want you to suffer because of me. If they think you're hiding someone, that could bring trouble." He shook his head firmly. "Trouble isn't your fault. People cause trouble when they don't understand things." He paused, looking into his cup. "I won't send you out there alone and helpless. Not now, not ever." His words carried a quiet strength, a kind that didn't need to be spoken loudly to be heard deeply. Nara felt a warmth spread through her chest, mixed with gratitude, admiration, and something she couldn't yet name. As the days passed, her leg continued to heal. She practiced small movements, lifting her foot a little, bending the knee slightly, always under Samuel's watchful eyes. He would help her sit upright, steady her when she tried to stand, and support her whenever she lost balance. The first time she stood with his help, even though it was only for a few seconds, he smiled with genuine pride, the kind that made Nara feel stronger than she was. Every evening, when the sun softened into gold and the land grew quiet, they talked. Sometimes he told her stories about his parents, the early years of the farm, the times he nearly gave up, but kept going because the land needed him. Other times, she told him about her people, the dances, the laughter, the strong women of her tribe, and the places she wished he could see. These conversations became the warmest moments of their days, filling the small farmhouse with something it hadn't held in years. 2 voices, 2 hearts, slowly learning to share space. But outside their quiet world, the settlers were still uneasy. Samuel heard rumors when he went into town for supplies, whispers that the Apache woman must be hiding somewhere, and someone must be protecting her. He kept his face calm and said nothing. He bought what he needed, paid quietly, and left before anyone could ask more questions. He returned home with the weight of worry, but the moment he stepped inside and saw Nara smiling faintly from the bed, all the fear seemed smaller. One morning, after nearly 2 weeks of healing, Nara woke feeling stronger. She looked at her leg, surprised at how much less it hurt. She slowly pushed herself up, and Samuel helped her stand. With his arm around her and her arm over his shoulder, she took her first real steps, slow, shaky, but full of hope. They both felt a deep sense of achievement, and Samuel's quiet, "You're doing wonderful," made her heart beat a little faster. That afternoon, as they shared lunch, Samuel spoke something he had been thinking for days. "Your people must be worried," he said. "They've surely been looking for you." Nara nodded. "Yes, they would have searched everywhere by now." "We need to take you back," Samuel said gently. "You're strong enough to travel in the wagon." The thought hit her harder than she expected. She knew she should be relieved, but a heaviness settled inside her. Returning to her people meant leaving the farmhouse. leaving the warmth she had found, leaving the man who had protected her, fed her, cared for her, and filled her days with quiet kindness. Samuel must have noticed something in her eyes because he added softly. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said quietly, but her voice carried something deeper, something she wasn't ready to explain. They prepared to leave the next morning. Samuel loaded blankets, food, and water onto the wagon. He made sure the wheels were strong and tightened every rope twice. His movements were slow, thoughtful, almost sad. Nara watched him from the doorway, leaning on the frame for support. She felt a tightness in her chest that she tried to ignore. Before sunrise, Samuel helped her onto the wagon. She sat against a soft pile of blankets, and he wrapped an extra cloth around her shoulders. The morning air was cold, but her hands felt even colder from nervousness. The journey took hours. They moved through fields, crossed small streams, and slowly entered the edge of the land known to belong to her people. As they approached, Nara saw shapes moving between the trees, quick, alert, watchful. Within moments, several Apache riders appeared, surrounding the wagon. Their eyes widened when they saw her. "Nara!" one of them shouted, riding closer. "We searched everywhere for you." Relief filled their faces as they gathered around. Samuel stopped the wagon and stepped aside so they could help her down. The riders greeted her with deep respect, checking her injury with concern. They asked what happened, where she was hurt, and how she survived. Nara looked at Samuel, who stood silently by the wagon, his hands loosely at his sides. She could see small lines of worry around his eyes. "He saved me," she said firmly, her voice strong. "I fell from my horse. I could not walk. I would have died alone. But he helped me, cared for me, and protected me." The riders exchanged looks, surprised, impressed, grateful. One of the older men nodded respectfully at Samuel. "You have our thanks," he said. "You are welcome on our land, if you ever pass through." Samuel nodded back, humbled and quiet. But as Nara stood there, surrounded by her people, she felt her heart pulling between two worlds. The safety of her tribe, the familiar faces, the voices she had known all her life, and the lonely farmer who had given her a home without asking for anything in return. She took a slow step towards Samuel, her legs still weak but her decision strong. She looked into his eyes, seeing the softness he was trying to hide. "I will visit," she said quietly. "When I heal, I will come." Samuel's eyes warmed. He nodded, almost shyly. "My door will always be open," he said. "Always. My. Her people helped her onto one of their horses. She held onto the saddle, her eyes lingering on him. Samuel stood by the wagon, watching her with a quiet sadness mixed with pride. And even as the riders turned and began to move deeper into the trees, Nara kept looking back, again and again, until he became a small figure in the distance. Samuel didn't leave until her silhouette disappeared completely. Only then did he turn the wagon around, heading back toward his quiet farmhouse. But the silence inside his heart felt different now. Not empty, not lonely. It was a silence filled with hope. Because some meetings happen by accident. Some bonds form without planning. And some stories like theirs don't end after a single journey. They only begin.